When transitioning from Xbox to PC, I knew one of the things that I wanted to tackle straight away was managing the in-game camera. So while planning the initial build, I definitely wanted that focus on immersion, but I knew I was facing challenges with both space and the finances for doing the build. So one of the first things I considered was VR. Obviously, pros of VR are going to be it's the ultimate in immersion. You put that headset on, and wherever you move your head, you are literally going to be moving the in-game view of the world accordingly. The downsides that immediately sprang to mind were cost. It was going to require me to build a much more capable PC than I would need otherwise. I also read that the VR views, just because of how the resolution is mapped so close to your eyes, you tend to see close-up stuff really well, but the things that are far out tend to be a little bit blocky because you no longer have the fidelity in the image. And the other thing that worried me a little bit was if I wanted to build out a physical cockpit, how does that work from VR? Because obviously the moment I look down at a physical cockpit, I'm not going to see it. I'm only going to see the in-game cockpit. And unless the things map perfectly, it seems like that would be problematic, relying on sort of muscle memory over time for the cockpit. Maybe I'm overthinking that, but it definitely felt like a potential downside with going with VR. Another option is multiple monitors to render more of the side windows of the cockpit, as well as what's in front all the time. And there are some sweet home cockpit builds that use this approach. Again, cost and space considerations kill this for me. This left me thinking about head tracking, which I haven't really used before in any kind of gaming experience, but a quick dig around online showed that Tobii, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, that their suite of products work really well, especially with flight simulators. So straight away with my build on this PC, I went with the Tobii 5, which is an eye tracker, and this is my review of using that with Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 over probably 50 plus hours of flying at this point. The device itself is very small and inconspicuous. Really, once it's installed, all you can see are a couple of LEDs that give away the fact that it's even there. First up, physically attaching this device and connecting it was a breeze. I was initially confused with some of the mounting options that were included in the box, but then I realized that the bulk of these are for when you're attaching to a curved monitor, because the Tobii device itself is flat. If you're attaching to a flat monitor like I am here, it simply sticks on, attaches flush at the bottom, and beyond that, installation is very simple. This sat perfectly flush with my monitor, as you can see, and the only other aspect of installation was running the USB cable to the PC. Super easy. Once plugged in, you'll need to create a profile and calibrate, which is a super simple process of launching the included app and looking at a few different spots on the screen. After that, I was into the flight sim to see what's what. Next up is probably the most arduous part of the process, and that is configuring it for your preferences. The Tobii isn't just a head tracker, but also an eye tracker, which means that your range of options allow you to track sensitivity and options for how it moves the in-game camera based not just on where your head is facing, but also where your eyes are moving. And it's not immediately obvious how you'd want to do this. The eye tracking is amazingly accurate. Initially, I had the Tobii configured to focus on this more, and as you can see, the tracker does a great job of focusing the world on whatever I'm looking at, which is really good for quickly looking around the cockpit. But I've found that for recording footage, which is what I'm doing for the other videos in the channel, it's actually probably too much, because the tracker is reacting in almost real time to what I'm doing, and it becomes second nature and intuitive to navigate the world, but the footage that is generated is a little more difficult to watch back because the viewpoint is just constantly bouncing around. Turning this down and focusing on head movement is, I think, a much more intuitive way to play. And for the Flight Sim 2024, it's difficult to overstate how immersive this is. For situations where I'm very focused on a lot of things and I'm looking around, like approaches and takeoffs in particular, I find I forget that I'm really soaking the world in through a single monitor in front of me. I can manipulate the in-game camera so intuitively that when you stop and think about it, it's quite incredible. There's definitely a sweet spot with configuration here, where head movements are appropriately translated, but once you find it, and based on your own personal preferences, you're basically set. I'll include my current config in the description below for those of you who are interested in how I have mine configured. Again, with the caveat that I've massively reduced eye tracking sensitivity to create smoother videos for content production. As for negatives, I sometimes find dealing with the extreme highs and lows of the cockpit or of the in-game world to be slightly more awkward. As I continue to build out my flight simulator, I want to focus more and more on replacing the in-game virtual controls, the virtual cockpits, with physical buttons and controls which are available. I know I could map all of these things, and actually all of this functionality is already mapped to keyboard bindings, but I actually find keyboard bindings to be one of the more immersive break-in aspects of flight simming, so I generally try to avoid that. Ultimately, this is just a matter of personal preference for me. With that said, the alternative, moving the in-game camera with the mouse to identify these, is viable, but usually I'll have to disable the head tracker to do that, and I'm most likely to be playing with these in-game controls during peak activity periods, which is usually taking off and approaches, which is when the head tracker is most useful. Another quirk that I haven't figured out a way to work around is how the default placement of the virtual camera changes during different phases of a mission. Equally, every time I get in the cockpit, I don't know where I'm going to appear. Sometimes it's behind the headrest, other times it's very low in the seat. Resetting the position a couple of times and massaging placement with the keyboard controls is all it takes, and once it's done, the system does a really good job of remaining in place even if I get up and walk away from my game in the middle of a flight. Still, I wish there were ways I could configure default camera placement per aircraft. And to be clear, I'm not blaming this on the Tobii Eye Tracker at all. This is, ultimately a interoperability issue. It's fairly nuanced, and such things are always going to be a trade-off between having 1,000 degrees of configuration and just having something work outside the box. With all that said, the advantages this technology brings far outweighs any of the minor problems I have that occasionally break immersion. The Tobii has support for a range of other games, and not just sim games. I can imagine it would be a positive enhancement to a number of titles listed here, but I haven't had a chance to try any of those yet, since I'm currently spending any gaming minutes I have on Microsoft Flight Simulator. And just in case you're wondering, I sometimes have my readers on when I'm playing, especially later at night, and the eye tracker is not at all fazed by any reflection or glare that might come off my specs. So as near as I can tell, the eye tracker works flawlessly with or without glass. For anyone who is considering a PC build, who is maybe space constrained from having multiple monitors or isn't quite willing to take the plunge into VR, I would say you could do a whole lot worse than the Tobii Eye Tracker 5. I easily give this a rating of 95% for flight simulator use. Well, that's a wrap on that one. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. If you haven't done so already, please hit the subscribe button. And remember, I'm not actually a pilot. I'm just a dumbass with a flight simulator. Catch you on the next one.